All right, delighted to be here. I think next year we'll be doing this all in person, but we've been living through the greatest disruption of our lifetime. Nothing else even comes close. People I've talked to said, what about life during the Second World War? But during the Second World War, we had loved ones in harm's way. We experienced shortages, but we still went to work. We went to school. We ate in restaurants, watched games in stadiums. We've never experienced anything like this. If you think about it, this is the biggest social science experiment of all time, except none of us volunteered for it. And really, for those who know my work, I've been tracking the internet around the world for 21 years. This was the ultimate victory lap of the internet. We had 3 days to get our work lives, our school lives, our buying behavior, our entertainment online. Within those 3 days, what couldn't be done online didn't happen. We learned what a lot of people, myself included, have been saying for years. Broadband is not just a pipe coming into the home, but it's a utility as important as water or power. And it's essential that that 5% of Americans who don't have broadband and couldn't go to school and couldn't do remote work, couldn't do work remotely or have conferences, it's essential that they get broadband in this year following COVID. But many of us didn't realize who had broadband, we didn't have enough broadband. We had enough broadband for one or two people to be watching Netflix, but we didn't have enough for 5 people in the home to be one going to work, one going to school, 2 watching Netflix, a 5th playing video games. This may be the first time in history kids screamed at their parents, stop, I gotta go to school. Nonetheless, I think this is the first time since the Allies took Paris in 1944 that we're going to rethink everything in our lives. Everything's not going to change, but it's going to be reconsidered. How we work, how we go to school, what we do, will we travel, what do we want to change? Do we want to bring all of our friendships back? Or is this a good time to prune relationships? And I think it's going to take 5 years to fully understand what we've gone through. I think some things will change back quickly. Learning. Students will be in front of their teachers as soon as possible. We think some things are going to take a couple of years. Travel, and we think some of those changes are permanent. Work, buying, we think the gains that digital has made in both are permanent. So we really want to understand this. We think the whole world is going to be rethought. So what we've done is we've taken 7 areas of life and we're going to track them for the next 5 years. We're going to stay in the field continuously. We think by looking at these 7, we can paint a picture of all life. But let me go through the 7. I'll tell you some of the things we found in the work we did in the middle of COVID and some of the things we think we may see. Starting with work. We think work is going to permanently change. As we looked at people working remotely, the first question we wanted to answer that I really haven't seen anyone else address is how many people can work remotely based on the type of work they do, the equipment they have at home, and the answer is pretty encouraging. 74% of us can do at least a little bit of our job online at home. About 24% can do all of their work online. And the same percentage, but different people, 24%, can't do any of their job online. Of those who only have a high school education, 51% cannot do any of their job online. So there are some real class issues. But if you talk to the people who worked online and now that their offices are opening, what do they want to do? Only 10% say they want to go back to the office every day like before. 30% say they never want to go back. I don't believe that. I think we're going to miss other people, and it won't be 30% if given a choice who never return. But right now, 60% say, I want a different schedule. Now, employers had always been suspicious of working remotely. They thought that what work didn't occur in front of them didn't occur. Working from home on Friday just meant a 3-day weekend. And we've seen that for some people who have the discipline, and the discipline you need to work remotely is to get up at the same time every day. Very importantly, get dressed, not trying to do their work in their bathrobe or in their pajamas. And particularly who do well are those who have a dedicated workspace with a door that closes, because one of the emerging problems coming out of COVID is the breakdown of the barrier between work and home or school and home. It was always traveling that was decompression, and now there is no barrier. Families are complaining that dad or mom are always working, and workers are complaining that the family doesn't respect that they're working. So I think the new norm for work is going to be everybody comes in Thursday morning, sees each other, feels like they're part of a team, is able to do things together, schmoozes in the hallway, gets coffee. Everybody comes in Thursday morning, and then they come in another 2.5 days a week of their own choosing, make meetings, and the other 2 days are working, or 2 to 3 days are working remotely. That's enough to forever change traffic, which is a good thing, but it also may change the nature of cities and public transportation and a lot of other things. So that's work. The second sector we're going to look at is what we call how we shop and how we pay for it. As far as shopping, the move to online has been there for a very long time. Amazon started in 1995, but it went into hyperspeed to the point where a $1.7 trillion company saw a 40% increase in its profits in the first 6 months of COVID. It's no big deal for a $10 million company to see a 40% increase in profits. But for an ocean liner like a 1.7 billion, that doesn't even exist in the history books. But we found of the people who had never bought a thing online, nothing, March 1st, 2020, within 4 weeks, 37% of them had become regular buyers. We don't think that money is going back ever to brick and mortar. As we talk to people in the middle of our work, they say they want to be back in stores. They want to be everywhere, but they want to be back in stores and outside, but they don't plan to buy. They plan to enjoy the ambiance of being outside, shopping, touching, but they still see their buying occurring online. And as far as how we pay for it, America never wanted to go cashless. We're actually a third world country where payment is concerned. Other countries, the UK, Australia, had much more advanced contact payment systems. We didn't even want to get rid of the penny, the world's most worthless piece of metal, but COVID pushed us into cashlessness. First, in the beginning, we didn't want to touch cash. People were afraid that cash contained the virus. Now we know that's not true, but many merchants didn't want to touch credit cards, didn't want to touch cash, insisted on cashless, and now most of us have gone completely cashless. for well over a year. We asked Americans with some banking work we did 2 years ago how much cash you carry. The average was about $45. We asked last month, it's down to about $22. So I think we've made a permanent move towards cashlessness, not completely cashless. You ask people, what can't you do with a credit card? And the only two answers they give you is I can't give tips. Of course, you can give tips in a restaurant, but I can't give tips to people like bellmen or parking attendants, and there's ways around that. And the other is I can't give any money to the homeless, and there may be ways around that as well. You ask people what they like about cashlessness, they'll tell you, among other things, I have a record of everything I spend. And then you ask people, what do they not like? And they'll tell you, I have a record of everything I spend. The third area we're looking at is what we call homes, buildings, and communities. We think the nature of homes is going to change. People who can want bigger homes because they know they're going to spend more time in the home, time they used to spend in the office, some of the time they used to spend in the office. We're going to see new homes have dedicated workspaces in every bedroom and probably a kitchen as well. Our evidence says that people are not abandoning cities. The people who were fortunate enough to have two homes left New York or left their city and went out. But we think people are drawn back to culture. We think it's going to take time for public transportation, but we think the sense of community and being around people will return. But one of the most disturbing things we found with our work last year, and maybe it isn't disturbing, maybe it's important or good, but 37% of people say that even after this is a distant memory, they still want to keep their distance from other people. We may start to associate other people with danger or a threat. We'll see if this is a memory, if this is a lingering memory or something we get rid of quickly. The fourth area we're looking at is travel. During COVID, recreational vehicle sales went through the roof. I have friends who say, wait a year, I can get you the deal of a lifetime on an RV. But we wanted RVs so that we had our own portable or mobile hotel rooms, and we took them to places like national parks, outdoors where we felt safe. Our work suggests it may take 2 or 3 years for travel to fully recover to the point where we want to get on crowded airplanes and go to crowded cities, but we think it will. Business travel, however, we think a third of business travel is dead forever. The most dreaded person within a business organization is going to be the business travel manager who says, sure, you want to go there, but do you really need to be there? We've learned that some business meetings really can be done well on Zoom. Taking relationships and moving them to Zoom worked well. Building relationships still doesn't work very well on Zoom. The fifth area we're looking at health and well-being, mental and physical health. On mental health, we saw a genuine worrying crisis during COVID. Now, we've known there's been a mental health crisis among Gen Z for a long time. That got worse, but it went across the whole country to where we saw 65% said they felt increased levels of anxiety. 47% said they were lonely. 35% said they were more depressed. People by 4 to 1 said they were drinking more rather than drinking less, and eating more and exercising less and using marijuana. We saw a real crisis. We hope coming out of this, people talk about how they have less interest in acquiring goods and spending money and more interest in experiences and relationships and will be more spiritual. Maybe that's like making New Year's resolutions the first week of January and 2 weeks later we've forgotten, but we will see how people deal with mental health. And physical health, I think we'll never see our doctors again face to face unless we have a compelling reason to see our doctors. Telemedicine, which many people resisted, has become the new norm. I love it because I'm done with waiting rooms, except if I absolutely have to be there. But the whole relationship with the medical community, we think, is changing. The sixth area we're looking at learning. As with everyone else, teachers had 3 days to move their courses online. Teachers who had never even heard of Zoom, within 2 weeks, Zoom had become a verb and we were Zooming, irrespective of whether we were on Microsoft Teams or WebEx. And most teachers never wanted to be online teachers. Students weren't prepared. Courses weren't made with online in person, and our work showed it really was a dismal failure. It got better last fall than it did in the spring because we had more time to work with it. But you ask students, do they want to go back? And 80% as soon as possible. Parents, not surprisingly, even more, about 84% want their kids back. We think there will be some legacy of digital, perhaps for summer school, maybe some elective courses, maybe students in college will take 3 classes in person and 1 through Zoom, or maybe teaching discussion sections will be through Zoom. But by and large, we're going to be in front of teachers again. And lastly, entertainment and sports. Our work showed that 55% that streaming was up 55%. Among those under the age of 30, it was up 75%. Streaming had been doing well, Netflix, for a long time, but it also reached a new level. For the first time, we had time for all the television. Everybody's been telling us for years we needed to watch all these 10-part miniseries that we know are great and we have on a list, or we have them stored in our streaming buffers, but we've never gotten around to watching them. During COVID, we finally had time. We didn't mind if The Irishman was 4.5 hours. The person who gets the award for the worst timing and entertainment during COVID is Jeffrey Katzenberg with Quibi Quick Bites, which was, I thought, a really brilliant idea of creating short form 7 to 10 minute content for young people on the go, just as they were taking a bus or subway to work, or if they got to work a few minutes early or during a coffee break. This service for people on the go was released in April of 2020 when no one was going anywhere. Quibi didn't fail. Failing was people looking at it and say, I don't want it. People never looked at it. It was just the world's worst case of timing. The world's best case of timing was Apple TV Plus and Disney Plus premiering in November, 3.5 months before COVID. People moved to them, particularly Disney Plus, which had a lot of programming. Apple didn't have as much, but it was still well positioned. The company that really took advantage of COVID was Netflix, because that massive catalog, a couple of us actually got to the end of Netflix. Hard to believe that that was possible. And I think Netflix emerged from the pandemic as the most successful entertainment company in history. I said that's not hyperbole. I don't think anyone has dominated the entertainment industry the way Netflix does. I think the first dollars anyone spends on entertainment is spent on Netflix. And before COVID, I argued that SVOD, these subscription video on demand services, that we were going to pay for 2.5 of them. Well, I think Netflix has the solid grasp for the near future, at least on one of those 2.5. I think the rest of the war for the other 1.5 is going to be between HBO Max and Disney Plus. Disney Plus has a lead. And I think that's going to create a very difficult environment for Paramount Plus, for example, who's either going to have to spend so much money on programming that I don't think they're prepared to spend, that it bumps Disney or HBO, or they're going to have to convince consumers to pay for 3.5, which I don't think they are. Apple, I don't think can survive at Apple TV Plus. I think Apple computers just fine, thank you. Can't survive at $5. I think they're going to become a permanent giveaway if you buy Apple hardware. And Peacock, the NBC Universal, even though it has a paid option, the evidence is pretty clear. Everyone's gravitating to the free one. The same way we don't think we pay for Amazon Prime Video because it feels like it's free because we buy Prime for the shipping. So that's the environment we're tracking, we're going to look at. We will issue quarterly reports starting in June. We'll try to really understand what's changing. But to our audience that I'm talking to with outdoor advertising and outdoor messaging, been a tough year with people locked down and inside. The good news is there truly is a euphoria in getting out. In the last month, Godzilla versus Kong, even though it was available for free if you were an HBO Max subscriber, did $100 million at the box office. And I did an unscientific poll asking those who saw it in the theater, did you go to see Godzilla versus Kong, or did you want to go to a movie theater and that's the movie you settled on? 90% said the latter. I think we would have gone to a test pattern, no disrespect to giant monsters. We want out of the house. We want to do everything and anything. Disneyland's booked for the next 8 weeks. We want to be on the street. We want to be in restaurants. We want to be outdoors where we're going to see this messaging. That, I think, is going to last for a very long time. I think we're going to think of our homes as places we work, places we sleep, of course. We may do a little learning, but I think we're going to want to move as much of our lives outdoors. I think all that outdoor dining we've seen in cities is permanent. I think we're going to change our lifestyle. And I think it's going to be where we see outdoor messaging. I also think advertising already is back in a big way. COVID, of course, occurred not just during not just a pandemic, but a social justice movement. I think advertisers are now expected, big advertisers, not corner stores, to deal with issues of climate change, sustainability, social justice in advertising. I think you will see more of it. But we really, Donald Trump always said the economy was going to take off like a rocket ship, and he was right, but what he missed it was you have to deal with COVID before that can happen. We seem to be dealing with it. I think we're treating it as if it's over. It doesn't matter. If it isn't, we're still not going back into lockdown. But I think a year that started out in a very depressing way with unbelievable surges in the COVID rate and the insurrection on Capitol Hill, I think has now become a really exciting year with business climbing, people excited to be together, and we probably are returning to the roaring 20s of the 21st century, hoping this roaring 20s ends better than the last, which ended with the Great Depression, but it really is an exciting year. Thank you. Wish I could be there in person, and hopefully I will be to tell you what we really find in a year.